How can you build an engaged, high-performing workplace culture, whether you're in the office, hybrid, or fully remote? Even better, how can you do it without the burnout and high turnover that often come from a fast-paced environment with high workloads? That's the focus of today's episode, and the answer will surprise you, or at least it's going to make you wonder why so few companies actually do it. My special guest today is tech leader and serial entrepreneur Graeme Barlow. He's an expert at building thriving companies and teams. Over the past 14 years, he's built and scaled 4 successful companies, selling 2 of them. Now, before you say the tech industry is different, I encourage you to hear his simple philosophy and highly effective strategy for building businesses and teams. Regardless of your industry or company size, Graeme's insights will be realistic and practical. Welcome to the Working Well podcast, the show that explores the rapidly changing landscape of work and well-being. Each episode, we dive into the hottest topics in leadership, employee well-being, and the future of work. I'm your host, Tim Boris. And before we dive in, let's learn a bit more about Graeme. As mentioned, Graeme is a seasoned serial entrepreneur. He's got an impressive track record spanning over 24 years. He's most renowned for his pioneering efforts in the tech industry, co-founding and leading 4 successful companies that have left a significant mark on the business landscape. This includes co-founding a gaming currency company that was acquired in 2006, a social gaming company Rocket Owl that grew to over 1 million active users and was acquired by Keshmet Technologies in 2014. Then there's ProPet Software, a thriving SaaS company specializing in business management tools for the pet industry, and numerous other companies that continue to thrive today. Since 2016, Graeme has been focused on building Iversoft, a world-class software development agency specializing in mobile and emerging technologies. Under his guidance, the company has grown from a team of 7 to a nationally distributed team of more than 50 employees with annual revenue approaching $10 million. Needless to say, Graeme knows business and what it takes to scale an idea and a team. All right, Graeme, great to have you on the Working Well podcast. And over the past 15 years, you've had amazing success. You've built multiple companies, built high-performing teams. Wow, that's congrats on that.
Thank you. Tim, it's awesome to be on the show. I appreciate you extending the invite and I've really enjoyed the conversations to date. It's been awesome kind of learning some of your perspective and sharing what we've been learning on what has been a pretty crazy past couple of years in the kind of employee and cultural wellness side of building teams and building culture. So excited to be here. Excited to chat.
Awesome. Well, I know from our previous conversations and chats we've had off the show, I'm super excited to dive into some of these. You've touched on a few things that I know our listeners will really get value from, and we're starting to see lots of big changes across, not just the tech industry, but workplaces in general. And I think some of the things that you've experienced are going to be tremendous value and help other organizations really benefit from some of the learning you've done.
Yeah, it's been a pretty exciting and crazy journey. And I mean, one of the things that I'm keen to dive into, especially for potentially your non-tech listeners, is even though the tech sector and at least like our current company, Iversoft, has always viewed ourselves as very progressive in the kind of people and culture space and very progressive in our leadership style and thinking, one of the things that has been most enlightening for us over the last 3 or 4 years has been how many assumptions we thought we knew about how things had to work or things that really couldn't change. And the more we've experimented with new strategies, new approach, the more we've been surprised at the results and realizing that a lot of maybe the more traditional philosophies on how things have to happen or how team building happens or how culture becomes a thing really aren't what we assumed they were. One great example that I think we laughed about last time is prior to the pandemic, we had in hindsight, somewhat comical. At the time, we thought very progressive policy of we had a remote work policy where staff could request, I think, 1 day a month with manager approval where they could work from home as long as it was planned well enough in advance. And we were like, yeah, we've got this remote work thing. And I don't think anyone really used it. And we were not believers in the space. And we went from kind of that mindset to, in the span of less than 30 days, taking the entire company fully remote. And at this point now have no office, no physical presence, and have more than 50 employees across the country working fully remote and performing at a higher level than we've ever seen in the 12-year history at Iversoft.
That's great. And I definitely want to chat a bit about the productivity side of things. But a lot of people think that tech now particularly is, oh, everyone's, globally distributed like Atlassian or something like that. But you were bricks and mortar for all the previous companies, and you everyone came to the office each day. So what tell me a bit about how your leadership style has had to shift over that time.
Yeah. So I think one thing that's interesting, at least for my own career progression, is I actually started like my first kind of business when I was very, very young in the space, like in my teens, was a fully remote company. It was the rest of the partners I had in the business were all friends I'd met through online gaming and never really connected in person, never really connected online. And that was 20 plus years ago. So my start in business and tech was remote. Since then, every company I built, um, from kind of consulting to game development to Iversoft, was bricks and mortar. And like when we look back at it, Iversoft scaled up to about 30 people in physical space. And right before the pandemic, we had just finished renovating 12,500 square feet of office space in Ottawa because that was where we were going to be growing and expanding and kind of taking over the world from. And one thing that, at least for me, has been a bit of a guiding star when you see so many experienced voices in the business world and in the tech world saying like, oh, you can't develop junior talent, you can't do culture, you can't do all of these things online and virtually. I come from the gaming space. I like my entire life has been online. um, the best man at my wedding I met through playing World of Warcraft 15 plus years ago, and I think we've met in person 3 times in my lifetime. Um, but has been one of my closest relationships, and I look at the kind of bonds and culture that can be created in online gaming through fairly large teams. Like, traditionally, it used to be up to, like, 40 people overcoming extremely complex, extremely, um, high-paced challenges. And if you asked some of those groups if they felt like there was culture, if there was collaboration, if there was shared learning, I think you'd get a pretty resounding and definitive, like, hell yes, there is. That's literally what we do. That's what defines us. That's how we make things happen. And yet, when you kind of shifted gears into a corporate setting, it was like, oh yeah, no, we couldn't possibly develop junior talent. You couldn't possibly nurture confidence or other things. And I think as a leadership group at Iversoft and for myself, it's been challenging that at every step and trying to look to other places where that's been overcome and leveraging those tools. And so we've used a lot of the tools from the gaming ecosystem, from different online communities to help try and create an online culture and online collaboration and seen pretty incredible results from it. However, it means that you have to be very intentional with it. And this is where I think what you're touching on a little bit of like leadership style has to change. If you take remote and as something that you are doing because you have to, or if you take it as a philosophy of like, we're hybrid, most of my focus is on the people in the office. There are also people on a screen that dial in and they will kind of get what they get. It's not going to work. Like you kind of have to go all in on virtual, and we are going to make sure virtual mentoring happens. And if it's pair programming, if it's check-ins, if it's one-on-ones, if it's random coffee chats with lots of different people in the company, cross-departmental and everything, all of that can be recreated virtually. And but not without leadership and kind of um, a strong embrace and championing from your executive team. And I think that's a big thing where a lot of companies have struggled is you don't necessarily have full buy-in from the executive team because a lot of the executive team kind of wants everyone back into the office. They want to be able to see people, they want to be able to connect. And I think there's value in those connections, but I think there's potentially more value in kind of occasional or quarterly or whatever it is, groups of people getting together versus like, oh yeah, no, we're infinitely better if we had 50 people in one room versus 50 people not stressed out, not commuting, distributed across the country, and access to some of the best talent we could possibly attract anywhere in Canada versus who is in commuting distance to a building.
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it when you said intentionality. It has to be a mindset shift that happens is, and you use the words going all in. However you describe it, it has to be a commitment by leadership to say this is what we're doing, and learning from it, and knowing that you probably won't be able to do the same things that you did previously, or at least in the same way. In
Yeah.
fact, some ways you can do them a lot better, but and that some of that is overcoming those belief systems that people have held so strongly. I love how you said what we thought we knew pre-COVID, and
Yeah.
what talk a
Humbling.
bit more about some of uh, those beliefs that you had to sort of reframe or get rid of.
Yeah. I mean, the big one was remote work. That was the giant crazy one of like we're like we couldn't possibly do what we do not remote. You need everyone around a whiteboard, around a table for a scrum and whatever, and all the developers need to be able to like see each other. And it's like, really? We got a little bit into that. We had a month into it, and cadence for like every metric we track was up. And if we look at the last 3 years, our quality of what we ship, the quality of the products, the quality of the code, caliber of the talent, like everything across the board is up. The other thing that I think was a big one is a lot of us bought into the philosophy that culture in a company is defined by the events and the parties or the quarterly events or like the stuff outside of the work. And the reality of what we've seen is culture, especially in a digital ecosystem, becomes way more about the values that bind you together, the philosophies that are kind of lived by the leadership team. And we hear this time and time again in one on ones, in reviews, and feedback from our staff that one of the core culture tenets at Iversoft is transparency. That we run a very transparent model. We have quarterly all hands where we go through all the financials for the company, good, bad, or otherwise. We show expenses, profitability, revenue, anything that's a concern for us. We go through all projects across all the teams, what's going well, what's not going well, and at any time are generally willing to sit down and have a conversation with the staff over kind of where things are at and what's going on. And we get so much feedback that that is such a culture shift for them to experience. Nobody's really come forward and say, man, transparency is nice, but I wish we had pizza every Thursday. Like it's been a lot of like, you guys live the transparency, you live those values. Another one has been that this is a little bit heretical in the services world, but the client isn't always right. It's part of our job as kind of the technology experts at the table to sometimes flag when the wrong decisions being made or to push back on conversations that need to be pushed back on. And kind of for better or worse, that's something we've lived throughout our whole portfolio. And the vast majority of the clients we work with on a daily basis really appreciate that because it's something that's very, it's way more of a partnership than just a kind of, yeah, you're shoving stuff down the funnel and we'll just kind of run off and do it. That's what's come through is like, that is what is our culture. That is what kind of defines Iversoft. That's what defines the leadership. That's what defines our people and culture team is that kind of air of openness and communication, transparency, willingness to kind of stand up for the values. And I think as much as we would have said pre-pandemic that the values played a big role in the company, I don't know that you would have had a crystal clear response from our entire leadership team that the values embody our culture. There would have been a lot of references to like the art that's on the walls, what we've named our boardrooms, the vibe around the office, all of that stuff. Whereas today, I think you get a unanimous answer from anyone in any lead position across Iversoft that it's those values that bind the culture, and that's what attracts people, and that's what keeps people. Which I think has been a really cool learning experience for me and very humbling to realize maybe how powerful it is, but also how wrong some of my perceptions were before. But I love it. I want to keep learning.
Yeah, and that has come up in a number of different episodes we've done over the past couple of years. Is that company? There's the culture and the well, I guess if we talk about culture, I believe culture comes from the values that are demonstrated by leadership every day, every single day. And now you can have a plaque up on the wall that says, "Here's our values: in honesty, integrity, blah 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 blah." I just want to throw up with that. But
Yep.
the fact is, the actions of leaders every single day and how they interact with their teams is what defines what the culture is. So and if we talk about stress and burnout, there's a great definition of stress is that the stress rises based on how far you are from your actual to your ideal. So
Interesting. Yep.
if there's a big gap in, like, if you're promoting and your marketing teams promoting these values, and the reality is that you're in a toxic workplace, the further that gap is, the bigger the stress and burnout.
Yep.
And I think especially as companies grow, and I've worked in lots of different larger companies over the years, and it's just there's zero connection by leaders or employees to what the actual, like, well, they know exactly what the
What the
real
handbook
world
says the
values
values
are,
are.
but
Yeah.
there's no connection to the values on the wall. And
Yeah.
the companies that do that well, that really connect that and hire for that and reward and recognize people for acting and stepping up to live into those values, they're the ones that thrive.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, but it's so uncommon these days.
Yeah. One of the exercises we did a couple years ago, and I think we're coming up on another pass to redo it. Um, is when we settled on kind of our core value set for Iversoft recently, we had a session where we kind of put all the values up at this time in a boardroom on a whiteboard with all the staff. And then we had anyone in kind of a leader management role kind of left the site for the day and worked somewhere else. And all the staff in the company had an opportunity to put either kind of printed out stickies or written sticky notes on each of the values of whether or not they agreed with them, whether they thought they were something we were actually living or not, um, if something needed to change in the way the value is presented, or if there was something that was missing. And honestly, it was such an incredible experience. I think we got kind of resounding endorsement of, I think there were 7 or 8 at the time, resounding endorsement of 3 or 4, a 100% kickback on one of them of just like, yeah, this is great. We don't do this. This isn't us. So try again. And then 2 or 3 of them where we get some really, really good feedback on, we like this. We think we're halfway there. Here's what we would need to do to actually make this part of our day to day and make this part of who we are. And we've tried to continue to collect the kind of feedback on a smaller scale, but I know we're going to be redoing it now that we're a lot larger. And I think that kind of, to some extent, anonymous, transparent, open feedback and communication with your team as to whether or not the day to day reality matches the writing on the wall is important and can be a very humbling experience. And then in some cases, I know companies that I've talked to the idea about doing that, and they're like, "Yeah, we would never do that. We know they wouldn't agree, and we wouldn't do that. It's just we. I don't care. We're gonna strive for it, and that's what matters." And it's like, okay, well, if there's that much of a disconnect between what's written and what you're kind of saying the reality is, then I think you have problems that go far beyond just disconnect on the values. But yeah, that temperature check to me is so so important.
Yeah, and that's something, I've done on the, coaching side with leaders and teams, and to really look at doing the there's the core values and then what we call the aspirational values, and differentiating between those, because I like how you said, yeah, there's some that's like, yeah, this is something we live every day, and there's these ones that, yeah, we're aspiring to that, we're partway there, but being able to differentiate, because when we talk about those core values, those are the things, the non-negotiables. That's
Yeah.
when all the stresses, the challenges, the conflicts that happen in interpersonal relationships, but also in the business, they typically are around one of the core values. And
Yeah.
that's something that, again, companies and leadership teams don't always put the time into really clarifying. And if they do, we often see the gap in communicating that to the rest of the team, and across the organization. So that, reception, or the janitor, or they need to know that what they're doing on a day-to-day basis is living into those core values, and to be recognized and rewarded for living into them. But that's often not happening, especially in larger organizations.
Yeah. So how I'm curious in your experience because you've I think been into a lot of organizations for this conversation. How often have you observed disconnect between kind of senior groups and maybe the more junior teams? And when you do, is there an opportunity to typically collect feedback from the junior teams, or has there been generally a fair bit of pushback of like, yeah, no, we're not pulling everyone to put an opinion forward?
It's that Yeah, it's a great question. The fact is, the opportunity is always there to seek feedback. Whether the desire to seek feedback is there is a different story. I'd say more often than not, is a disconnect between executive leadership team and call it frontline
Yeah.
employees. Um,
Why do you think that is?
that's a good question to ask those leadership teams.
Fair.
and and again, it comes back to why there's so much challenge around toxic workplaces. And not I don't often like using that word, toxic workplaces, because it's not always toxic. It's just, a lot of times it's just man, it's like,
Yeah.
whatever, I show up, go do my job. And I hear so many people say, you don't have to love your work, you just show up and you put in your time. And but as a business owner, I don't want to see, like, I don't want
That's a
people in my
that's a disease in the
organization.
company, right? Like that is a that spreads.
Yeah. And they're like, what do the stats show now? It's something like 65% of people or more in the companies are disengaged.
Yeah.
Some are passively disengaged. They're just like, whatever, they're the meh. And then there's the actively disengaged that are sabotaging the business.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the focus goes on those people. We obviously want those out, but there's this middle of the bell curve that's just there. They're putting in the
Yeah.
time. They do okay work, but they're not thriving. They're not happy. But that's where the opportunity is to, as leaders, when we can engage those people, it's like turbocharge
Oh
for
yeah.
your corporate culture, your results. And I think a lot of leaders are just so overwhelmed right now with everything that's going on. Is there either I guess it's a combination of overwork, overwhelm, and maybe not necessarily having the skills to start to implement those. We see in even massive organizations, there are little pockets within the organization where certain leaders are creating thriving teams and departments,
Yeah.
but it's the exception rather than the rule. It's not a strategic initiative top down to say, hey, we're going to develop our people and we're going to create this culture. And I think people often look at the tech industry and say, yeah, but it's different, they've got higher margins and they have the money to pay people more and add these perks. But as a Canadian tech entrepreneur, what how do you see that being different?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I love the call it too for like the segment in the middle is where a lot of the opportunity lies. So I would say product software companies definitely tend to have higher margins and have an advantage in that space. Um, However, at least in the context of kind of Iversoft, like we're a services business, so we have similar margins to other service-based businesses where we charge a 20% markup on our kind of time and materials costs. So that's where we're kind of looking, and we follow very transparent pricing. So we're very upfront with our clients of what our cost basis is and what the markup is, and we still make it work within that. I think a lot of businesses are often afraid to communicate how their business model works, especially in the services space. There's a lot of effort to kind of like hide the math that happens behind the curtain, which sometimes makes it more challenging to raise your prices or negotiate. Like um, we moved our prices a fair bit during the pandemic, but it wasn't a huge issue with our portfolio because we were very clear with our client of like, here's the cost of salaries in the team you have. Here's what's changing because the whole world's going crazy. This is what the new pricing is because of that. So being more transparent and open helps, I think, facilitate some of that conversation. The other thing that I think sometimes gets lost is just because tech has is more knowledge based, it's more um, uh, potentially adaptable to remote. There's a lot of things that we focus on for keeping people inspired, keeping people motivated that is transferable, and a lot of that comes down to making sure you've got a culture where you recognize rising talent, be willing to kind of promote quickly. A lot of the times we talk to businesses, and we can be a little bit controversial here. And one of the things I love and hate hearing from business owners is like, "Oh, there's no talent. I can't hire anyone." It's like, no, you can't hire anyone at the crappy wage you're trying to pay them. Pay them more, raise your prices. You will have talent, and you'll be the only person in your sector that has the best players in the space. Um, and I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked: is happy, motivated, well compensated people do better work. That's just a fact. And you can see that in so much of the data. And I would be willing to bet that that translates over to most kind of physical industries, most service industries. We've certainly seen it. And we talk on it a little bit of like, we went remote and we saw productivity go up. Reality is, we saw productivity go up because parents weren't spending hours commuting. They had more time with their family and kids. They had more flexibility of like, oh, a kid is sick. I'm not panicking to figure it out. I can balance stuff a little bit differently. I can do the time I need to do for my job and then still be available to make my own food at home, or like whatever it is that helped to reduce the stress. That's the reality of what helped. And if you're not in a remote situation, well, you can't do that. There's so much else you can do in terms of providing certain flexibility by providing a little bit of autonomy of like, people are adults. They can make decisions for themselves. When you over track and over monitor and kind of almost over engineer your systems to contain and control everyone, people feel very contained and controlled and not motivated. And so often we see a combination of kind of that system plus a lot of arbitrary barriers to career progression, where it's like, okay, yeah, you're showing leadership and you're really killing it. We require 3 to 5 years of experience to move you up to the next role. So like in a year from now, we can talk about a promotion. Like if you've got someone that's killing it, promote them quickly. Show that there's upward mobility in your company. Show that people that are motivated, that are working hard, can advance. I laugh a little bit seeing all the TikTok videos and the Instagram videos and everything trending in all of the new generations of like, you have to change jobs every 2 years to progress. And I think in most traditional organizations, that's true. Like I've talked to business owners that are like, oh, I couldn't possibly give that person a $10,000 raise because they're going from junior to intermediate. They've only been here 9 months. It's like, okay, they've been here 9 months. Are they delivering at the level of the person that's making 10,000 more? It's like, yeah, but like that's way too fast. They might get greedy. It's like, or they might realize they're worth what they're doing and you're billing them at that value. So like there's a disconnect there. And I think that's all of that goes into how do you motivate, how do you address that middle slice that isn't necessarily about like, oh, it's remote or it's tech, like it's people.
Yeah.
And that has been kind of our guiding philosophy for a long time at Iversoft. It's like, we are a service-based business where our product, our offering is really smart people to work on problems. Therefore, as a management team, our only job really is to make sure we have clients and then make sure that they get the happiest, smartest, most productive people we can possibly find them. Everything else is kind of noise. And when you kind of distill it down, like when the figurative lights shut off and the office is empty, there's nothing there. Like we don't have a product that we're selling where we sell the talent of people. And a lot of service-based businesses are the same way. And but don't necessarily recognize the people as the product, right? They think it's like, oh, it's our brand, it's our legacy, it's whatever. And it's like that's part of it. But at the end of the day, you're selling people doing things. And the more skilled those people are, the happier they are, the better they are with your clients, the friendlier they are, the more successful your company is going to be. And so finding 100 different ways to improve wellness and happiness is how you grow talent at those companies. It's how you retain people.
Love it. Yeah, exactly. Like hire great people, support them, help them learn, grow, and improve. And then if we take some of the recent stuff, it's then you put tracking software on their computer so it tracks their mouse strokes and keystrokes. Like, come on. I,
Yeah.
I I shake my head when I see that in the industry these days.
It's funny because it's such a hard line to walk. And we've actually had to have a lot of conversations with staff about this because as a remote business, I mean, like we ship technology all over the country. We have proprietary code on people's computers. It took us a while to find good fleet management tools for all of our hardware that did not include or could very explicitly for all staff show that they are not doing keystroke logging, they are not doing the remote monitoring, but they are giving us the ability to GPS track a computer or remotely lock a computer and report it as stolen. Like those were two things we realized were kind of a reality as a remote company. Is like we need to be able to turn off a computer anywhere in the world and just lock it down and make sure nothing can happen to it. But finding that middle ground, finding software, it's like I don't need it to be invasive. I just need kind of those two options for um, what we needed to be able to do was challenging. We found a good solution though, so we're happy in that space. But it definitely took some good conversation with staff. Like we are not doing this. We will do a whole tech demo of like if we try and take over, here are all the pop-ups and prompts it gives you of like, do you want this person to take over your computer? Do you want them to see this? Do you want them like we're not doing any of that. We just need to be able to kill the power and track where it is. Because if you lose it, or if someone runs off with one, we need to be able to find it. We actually had that. We had someone ship a laptop to China, and we were able to, the first time it turned on in China, we were able to shut it down and kill it and take care of it. And fortunately, there was nothing associated with it that was a problem, but it was insightful to see that journey and be grateful we had the right tools in place.
Yeah, and that's probably a whole other podcast episode is the technology these days of how to manage and help remote teams thrive. We need technology to do it, but how that technology is used really, I think it starts with trust
Yes.
in the people, and as my wife likes to say, trust but verify. Like you have to lead with trust and have
Yep.
safeguards in place, like you said, to be able to remote shut down a computer. But if you don't trust your people to get the job done that you've asked them to do,
You
that's
hired
the
the
first,
wrong people.
yeah, that's the first issue.
Yeah.
And it will become very clear very quickly if someone is not delivering. If you're leading people effectively, doing your one-on-ones and have clear
Yeah.
expectations and metrics, it's very evident who's
Oh
performing and
yeah.
who's not.
Oh yeah.
But that goes
You
again
can
to the leadership
extremely
aspect.
quickly identify when the performance isn't there. And the reality is, like a lot of we sometimes hear like, oh, I can't possibly put the metrics in place, or we don't have the time to look at that. I was like, if that is true, then you also don't have the metrics in place to identify rock stars in your company. You're also not getting the right data to identify and celebrate when you have people that are absolutely killing it, that are going above and beyond, that are doing that because it's the same systems, it's the same metrics, the same KPIs that come out of it that will help flag underperformance, also flag your superstars. And if you're not celebrating your superstars, why would anyone that has the capability of becoming a superstar stick around? if there's no hope of them being acknowledged or progressing because of it, if it's purely going to be based on like personal politics of how well they navigate their one-on-one relationship with their manager, you're not going to get a culture or a team of high performers that are moving the needle forward. You're going to get a culture of politically savvy networkers. Yeah. There are some businesses and maybe that's what you're looking for. For us, we're looking for the superstars. We're looking for the people that are crushing it. And it's funny. We haven't kind of touched on this yet, but one of my favorite quotes that I reiterate often. Unfortunately, we've never actually run into this too much, but every now and then I catch myself falling into the trap a little bit, which is the whole like theoretical conversation of between the CFO and a CEO of like, oh, we're spending so much money to train these people and buying courses. What if we train them and they leave? And the CEO responds with like, what if we don't train them and they stay? Like to me,
I
that's
literally have that quote on my website, like for the
I
corporate.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard it years ago, and it to this day is one of my favorite things of like, yeah, if you pull someone out of the market, put them into your company, put them in a black box and have them ship the same stuff for 3 years, and then 3 years later wonder why they haven't become an intermediate or senior person or improved in some way, or they're behind on the newest trends. I mean, software, I mean, we work in mobile. By virtue of Apple and Google shipping new operating systems every year, the space is moving every single year. There are new languages, new technologies, new hardware every year. You have to have a system that is keeping people trained and on top of things and make time and make space for that to happen, or you are going to fall behind. Same with any trade. Like if you're not taking time to train people and invest in development of the next step, yeah, you can get 3 years in with the same you've had the person doing the same routine stuff every year, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know that they ever have the potential to advance." Like, you haven't created space for them to advance, and now you're complaining you've got someone that's not learning, right?
But I had a related conversation this morning with she's a HR leader, and she's been brought into a very, not a tech industry, but a subject matter expert company. We'll just call it engineer types, um, in more blue collar heavy industry. And almost all of the leaders in that company are subject matter experts that have been put into leadership. And she's like, they think they still need to be doing the job. And we had a great conversation around that being one of the major barriers to promoting people is when you go from a doer to a manager, your role is completely different. It's great to
Yes.
take that subject matter expertise to understand the business and understand the roles that are happening, but your job is not to do anymore. Your job is to lead the people that do. And I think
Which is
that
a very different skill set.
it is. Yeah. And it's something that still, even in large companies, gets completely lost.
Our people and culture team would be losing their minds hearing you say this right now. So it's funny you say that. Like one of the things we have leaned into huge in the last six months. It's been on our periphery before, but like I would say the last 6 months has had a like heavy concerted effort at Iversoft at least. Is we realized as we were getting bigger and bigger and doing just that of like take your most senior developers, your most senior designers, your most senior whatever, and moving them into leadership positions. Shockingly, just because you change someone's title doesn't actually mean they have any training or understanding how to lead and manage people. And if you don't take a proactive stance, you end up with a one-on-one 6 months later that's like, oh, we're getting a lot of negative feedback that you run really bad one-on-ones. Or like you don't give negative feedback well. It's like, and they're like, oh, how should I do that? What should I change? It's like, oh, yeah, we probably need a system that trains management, that trains leadership, that trains how to do these things. And we've been building now a whole kind of pre-lead program where people that are aspirational for leadership get to kind of try out a leadership role for a month before getting promoted into it. Because I think that's a whole other thing is a lot of companies sometimes promote people into a role, realize they never should have done that, and are now trapped because you can't move them backwards and you're stuck. And So we've done a combination of things. So like one is creating the pre-lead training and then also creating lead and manager training, facilitated by our people and culture team on how to conduct one-on-ones, how to give feedback. They can shadow other successful one-on-ones and management interactions, but also looking at a scenario where we develop kind of a forked or split career path within Iversoft where there is a path that people can go down where they continue to become subject matter experts and can continue to advance their career, or they can choose to branch into management. Sometimes I think organizations set up a structure where you hit a plateau where the only way you can advance is management, and not every domain expert should be a manager. Sometimes it's okay for them to just continue to become a more senior developer, designer, architect, engineer, whatever. I mean, like, yeah, some of the best engineers I've ever met or worked with, phenomenal engineers, probably should never run a team of engineers. Should be a rock star contributor on a team of good engineers, but have zero interest in the people management side of things,
Yeah,
and
there
that's
are a lot of people that
okay.
just don't want to do that. They're like, I love what I do. I want to keep doing this. I'm good at it, and embrace that. But they shouldn't be
Yeah,
necessarily penalized for that.
no, and I think that's one thing that is challenging, and I definitely think it's easier in tech is there isn't necessarily really a ceiling for where people can advance in their own proficiency and discipline as a just pure developer or like software architect. I think there's potentially more of a ceiling in other industries or other roles, but I don't know. But I think having an intentional structure in your organization where people can advance in both paths is important if your goal is long-term retention. If it isn't, then I think being very candid with people of like, yeah, the only step forward for you for here is into a management role or into another company. And I think you can always find another company that will potentially pay more for that discipline, if they're not providing that opportunity. But yeah, the answer isn't always just force every senior person into team leadership, because it's also a good way to scare off a lot of high performers on that team if you put someone into team leadership that is not interested in the person management side of things and they would infinitely prefer to be a doer. Um, and we've definitely been through that before where we've promoted phenomenal talent into leadership roles and then realized we took away everything that made them excited about their job, and months in they're just going like, this is not for me. Like I want to go back to the doing stuff because the people management side is exhausting.
Yeah.
Whereas we want the people that are lit up by like coaching and supporting and developing talent and passing on knowledge and technique and all of that. But um, yeah,
And to give
again,
them
it
the
all has to be
skills.
intentional.
Yeah. To when they get put into a position, to make sure they have a development path to build the skills needed if they want to go into that path.
Yeah,
And that comes back to just that overall culture and building great teams. If you, yeah, have the right training to develop people into the role, you like who's engine like a great doer engineer can become an amazing leader. But as you said, it's a different skill set that has to be
you have to teach
developed.
them.
And
They went
yeah,
to they went to school for years to become an engineer. They have years of career progression in the doing. All of a sudden, you shift gears on them, drop them into a role, and are like, you should be just as good at this as you were at the engineering stuff. It's like, how? On what world? Like, you have to give them the skills. You have to at least take a step there. And I'm not in any way saying we've figured it out. We're in the process of like figuring it out and finding the gaps and learning. But I think that's something that I see happen over and over again in companies is like, yeah, it's just you get promoted, and as soon as you have the like new salary and title, they're like, all right, well, you're a manager now. Manage.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, it's crazy.
yeah,
Now, one thing we touched on briefly earlier that I really wanted to dive into maybe as a bit of discussion is like we've seen the role and structure of HR people wellness change dramatically. We've definitely seen it shift in Iversoft. I wanted to maybe get your opinion and share some of our insight on like what do you see has changed in the leadership structure in organizations from what was traditionally like your I don't know C-level HR role to the introduction of like people and culture roles to the introduction of like potentially wellness roles. What's changed? What do those roles mean? What's different between them, and how do companies benefit from that?
Yeah, the role of HR has drastically changed over the past few years. Um, in the past, I call it pre-COVID, HR was seen as basically the an administrative function. Um,
Okay.
there were it was the most common structure in most especially large organizations, large to medium, would be your CEO, the COO, CTO, and then VP of HR. And just that in itself, I often use the analogy of HR sits at the little kids table at Christmas, like, and you
Yep.
know they're not
Yep.
treated from a mindset standpoint as unequal in the C-suite. Now, there are, and even pre-COVID, there were companies with C-level HR, and I think in those companies, depending on the person in that role, there can be a much more strategic role. So, I talk a lot about chief well-being officer, and and technically, the right person in a CHRO role or a CPO role can do a lot of those things and have that same impact. But what happens is a lot of the people, well, every CHRO or chief people officer I've seen has come up through HR. And so they're
Right.
steeped in the HR mindset of payroll benefits. And they might be very good at managing the financial aspect of the people business, but very few C-level HR people are seeing the overall strategic impact of well-being throughout the organization. And that's where I'm like, have people have HR do what they really do well, which is the people side. And while well-being is definitely people side, there's also uh, a strategic component, organizational structure. Well-being goes to leadership, learning and development. It goes to operations. It goes to sales and marketing. It's finance. Where's the budget line items to get all these things in place? And I think I don't think, I know it's a different skill set than typically comes up through um, years and decades in HR.
Right.
Not to say it can't happen, because there's a lot of a massive and rapid change in HR over those last few years. I've talked to so many business owners and C-level leaders that are like, I've talked at the start of COVID, I talked to my HR director or VP more times in the last like month than I have in the previous 10 years combined.
You're like,
It's like,
problematic, but I'm glad we're heading in the right direction now. Okay.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
whether it's a chief well-being officer or CHRO, as long as strategically well-being is placed in the C-suite and there's line item accountability for the performance of people, um, and that is a multidisciplinary impact. It's how do we restructure operational processes to help people thrive? How do we set up the budget to allow people to do that? How are we internally marketing to our team? How are we externally marketing to attract people? And so all these things are there. And I've used the analogy before of the pieces of the puzzle.
Yep.
So they're in most companies of any size, with say 50 people or more, they have most of the pieces of the puzzle in place. They've got a great benefits plan. They've got a learning development team, a people team. They've got the finances and the operations, and it's there. The systems are in place to run the business well. But what's missing is the top of the puzzle box with the picture. And so strategically, as a senior leadership team, to sit down, and every senior leadership team goes and does their mission, vision, values, and their annual goals.
Yep.
but on the specifically the people performance and well-being side, to have strategic planning around what does that picture look like? What do we want the performance and well-being of our people to do as part of contributing to our financial and organizational goals? And then who's responsible for that and how are we rolling it out in the organization? That picture does not exist in 99.9% of companies, despite having all the pieces of the puzzle on the table. So how do we, and that's really what I do, is come in and say, okay, let's take what you already have and flesh out that picture. And then once we know the picture, it's like, oh, well, this piece can go here. This piece can go
Yeah.
here. And hey, we might need to add this one, but you probably don't have to add too much more other than being able to restructure what's already on the table and see it in a new perspective, from a new perspective. And so I think that's not happening even in companies with CHROs.
I would agree with that. I would say we're part of the way there, but I can't necessarily think of other companies I've interacted with that have that picture mapped out. And I think that's, yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the things that we've run into as a question we got a lot early on, is like we added HR as a function in Iversoft earlier than I think most companies do. We had a full-time person in HR by the time we were 9 people,
Mhm.
and have had full-time HR from that point on, largely because what we said at the beginning is like our entire product offering is smart people. Therefore, if we're not doing the right things to attract and retain smart people, we don't have a whole lot to do. Um, but tying the kind of overall wellness philosophy together and having those metrics, I think that's something I know our people and culture team has been building KPIs for and really diving into how to measure and how to um, improve. But you're absolutely right, and like the vast majority of companies haven't connected those dots yet. They have the pieces, and they could, but starting those conversations at the senior level, I think, is challenging. Um, which is
Is
why
you
I was kind of excited to be part of the podcast and part of here, because I love the work you're doing, the message you're putting forward. And I think more companies need to recognize as we go forward and as you're in a more competitive hiring landscape and in a more competitive global landscape for competition, like how you nurture talent is going to be so important for being able to compete.
well, you talked about it earlier in the first few minutes of the intentionality and the mindset, and until C-suite leadership starts to look at it through that lens, it's not going to happen. And the frustrating part for me over the past few years, and well, not me, just me, but the well-being industry in general, is that billions have been spent on increasing benefits plans and doing different workshops and seminars, which is, those are great tools in the toolbox, but without the bigger picture and the strategy, how do we know those are being effective? And we know right now, based on the stats, they're not being effective. Despite
Yeah.
billions of being spent, people are more stressed and burnt out than ever. So that senior leadership is like, they're throwing it out there, checking the boxes and saying, yeah, we had to do this, we had to do this, it looks good on paper. We're not measuring the outcomes. And it's finally starting to shift. We're 3 years plus since COVID hit, and finally people are like, all right, I guess we can admit what we were trying to do isn't working, and we're
Yeah.
still struggling to attract people and keep people, and morale's low. Okay, we need to do something different. So we're starting to see that shift, but it's
Yep.
been,
Well, I think the new generation's coming up. Like when you talk about people about hiring Gen Z and hiring, um, is it Gen Y? Gen, I don't know. And then Gen Alpha's like on the internet now, which is weird. But when you talk to all these generations that have grown up completely native on the internet, and they have options, they can launch their own businesses. They can um, find distribution and scale easier than it's ever been in any generation in history. You'd better have a real compelling offer for why they should come work with you and why your business and your ecosystem is the right place to grow and develop their careers versus the thousand other side hustles they're being sold on TikTok every day. Like, and I think what's funny is I keep hearing from maybe older generations that like the new generation doesn't want to work. It's like, no, they're content to work. They just don't want to work at a crappy job, and they've got options that they could do themselves that may not pay quite as much as your entry level position, but close enough that they're not going to notice a lifestyle difference. And in one scenario, they're in control of their lives. In the other scenario, your monitoring keystroke software is going to just haunt them forever. So yeah, I think there's a big shift coming um, across all industries about how businesses operate to attract and retain talent, and it's gonna be exciting. I think it's taken a bit of a step back in the last couple of months with the kind of probably correction in the tech industry from some of the overhiring during the pandemic, but I don't think that's gonna last. Like you're not seeing a ton of big tech companies laying off tons of people and then nobody's rehiring, nobody's growing. Like there's a equal cohort of new companies coming up and growing and gobbling up the talent that um yeah, we're seeing change coming, which is exciting. It's been probably a pretty crazy journey in the wellness industry or like the kind of corporate people industry for the last eternity. Trying to
Yes.
change the narrative.
Well, and one last thing I wanted to touch on is something we had discussed in a previous conversation about some of the changes that Iversoft made in when going fully remote, and some of the learning around flexible culture, the compressed 4-day work week, and how what the reaction was from clients and staff on that.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. So we went remote, and then I think within a year of going remote, we started having lots of conversations of like, okay, if this is our world now, we've fully embraced the remote thing. What else? What other assumptions do we have that were kind of untouchable things that maybe we should go challenge it again? Largely because we'd all had our eyes opened on like 100% consensus of like remote's not possible. Remote is infinitely better than everything we were doing. Okay. What else do we believe is kind of a sacred rule that could be challenged? And we started looking at a lot of the research, and I think our director of people and culture and our COO brought some of those forward, and we're looking at like there's all kinds of research, especially in the knowledge based industries world of like 4-day work weeks are um, potentially competitive, potentially a big advantage. We weren't at a state yet to go fully in on the kind of 4-day shortened hours work week, but we had seen overwhelming feedback from our staff that going remote, the biggest change to their lives had been the flexibility, had been the capacity to accommodate shit happens in your family. Like your kids show up, your kids are sick, or like you need to pick them up at 3 o'clock, like whatever it is. And we started looking at, okay, well, how do we lean into the flexibility? What do we actually need from people? How often do we need to meet? How often do we need to be calling people in for a video call or a conference call? And how often are we on calls with our clients? Because a lot of the times our client work is kind of heads down writing code or testing apps or whatever it is. And so we introduced it for the company and piloted it for, I think, 2 months. The idea of a compressed 40-hour work week. And what that meant was we established what the core office hours were for Iversoft. So these were the core hours that we expected to be able to book anyone in a meeting, and they would have to show up without giving us prior notice for something. And that ended up being um, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern. That 5-hour window, Monday to Thursday, we needed to be able to book anyone in the company. Outside of that, how you accomplished the rest of your hours or how you got your schedule done was kind of completely in your hands. We had some staff say, no, they want the 8-hour Monday to Friday week. We had a lot of devs that were already doing longer hours because they weren't commuting, saying, well, I've done 4 10-hour days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Does that mean I just don't have to do anything on Fridays? It's like, yeah, if you've put 40 hours of kind of code into the system and you've logged that time, we're not asking for an extra day from you. It's okay. What it required from a company process standpoint was you cannot book mandatory meetings or client meetings on Fridays. For some people, that gave them a quiet heads down day. For other people, they'd already done their 40 hours by the end of the day Thursday, gave them a 3-day week. And we left it flexible so that it's not like you have to lock in at your contract signing that I will do this. It can vary week to week as long as we need you there 10 to 3 and we need you hitting all of your deliverables every week. Outside of that, choose your schedule. And after piloting it for 2 months, we ended up incorporating it fully into our core philosophy for Iversoft and everything because it did a number of things. Like we again saw a continued productivity bump and boost from similar to what we'd seen when we went remote, from people being able to take back their schedules a little bit, reduced stress for managing family, kids, whatever. Like because of the hours, parents could take their kids to school. They had no problem picking their kids up from school. So that whole transition became a thing. There's a whole cohort that does a couple hours after dinner Monday through Thursday because that's a good time for them to collaborate and work. And it's after kids have gone to bed. And again, we saw the caliber of talent that we could recruit and the volume of applications we got on every position we put up went through the roof, which is the win for the clients. And that's how we kind of presented it with clients. It's like, look, not all of them loved the idea that they couldn't book us out a call on Friday. However, when we went through the conversation of like, okay, you're going to give up being able to book us on a Friday. In exchange, I am going to get you some world-class talent that we can pull from some of the biggest companies on the planet that we can't afford, you can't afford on a raw dollars basis, but they're willing to come work on your project. They're willing to come work at Iversoft because they value that family flexibility, that kind of work-life balance opportunity more than the kind of Fortune 100 world they're living in right now. And that's been game-changing for us. Like it's been amazing. While everyone in the world was like, there's a talent shortage, we're like, we are drowning in resumes, which was awesome. And the output's been amazing. It really hasn't caused an issue. We're very upfront with it. It's on our site. It's in our branding. We talk to clients about it upfront. And the vast majority of our business is retainer clients that expand their teams and renew and keep growing. So the results there speak for themselves. I think we've grown almost 40% every year over year for the past 4 or 5 years. And like a lot of that growth comes from being able to pull in phenomenal talent and keep them.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's about the saying in tech is it's not a bug, it's a feature. And so when you
Yeah.
say it to your clients, it's like, yeah, this is the benefit of doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And well, Graeme, it's been amazing having you on the show. And I know we could continue talking for a long time. And we're going to have to chat about having you on the show again down the road and pick a different topic next time.
That'd be awesome.
Where can people find you?
Yeah. So I'm on Graeme Barlow on all the social channels or graemebarlow.com. If you're looking for software development support, iversoft.ca is the place to check us out. And always happy to chat all things kind of tech, entrepreneurship, and development.
Very
Thank
cool.
you so much for having me. This was
gaming,
fun.
apparently, right?
And gaming. Always gaming. So I'm still on the fence of whether I want to like dive into Twitch and stream some gaming because I think that would hurt my ego a little bit. But yeah, always a fan.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for being a guest on the show, and I will make sure those links go in the show notes. And
amazing.
Thank you so much. We will catch up again soon.
Thank you, sir.
That wraps up another episode of the Working Well podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Which guests or topics would you like to see featured on the show? Message me through LinkedIn or on the contact page of timboris.com. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Tim Boris with Fresh Group and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.